Did you see Trump's letter to the Prime Minister of Norway?
I just heard about it.
Okay, well,
That's right. He said it was if I understand correctly, I just saw the headline. I didn't actually read the letter, but what I understand is that he's taking Greenland because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize.
Pretty much. I have the letter here. It's pretty short. I'll read it to you just because I think it's insane. Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel any obligation to think purely of peace, although it would always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China. And why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. But we had boats landing there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding. And now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President DJT.
Oh my, that even for Trump is way out there. I mean, really, well, this is very much in line with what I think he told the New York Times. They're asking, why do you need to do it? And he says partly is psychological need. And they said, are you talking about, the country or yourself? And he said, myself, it feels right to me. And then he added, and I've been right about everything so far. So
yeah.
This is, if this is not megalomania, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, surely most of his base sees that now, right? Or what used to be his base, a lot of the...
Some of it. But no, a lot of it's been pointed out, a number of people who hardly were aware of the existence of Greenland, when they cast a ballot for Donald Trump last November, are now saying, oh, yeah, we definitely got to take new. We're not talking a lot of people. I think like 15% are excited about it and on board with it. The polls do show that a majority of Americans, a solid majority, does not think that this is a good idea. And it's interesting, too, that like in the case of Venezuela, even though the optics were really good, right, it was a successful mission, you only have something like 33% support and an equal amount of opposition. So I think that was played well to his base, but to the American people as a whole, they just never were convinced that Venezuela was important to us. And that seems to be even more true of Greenland.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I'm trying to wrap my head around it, just how quickly the United States is falling apart. I don't think there's a single country out there that likes us other than Israel. And I don't know if Israel really likes us. They just want to use us. Right? I mean, they need us. But I think literally every country in the world, Canada doesn't like us. Europe, our allies, they are furious. This is something that the Europeans are furious, and rightly so. I mean, I feel bad for the Europeans. They just got screwed. They chose the wrong side.
Yeah, I actually honestly don't feel bad. I mean, I feel bad for average Europeans, but not for the European leadership. They brought this on themselves. I mean, it's just they've made so many bad choices. They decided to cut their relations with Russia, to adopt a hostile relationship with vis-a-vis China. And so essentially, to put all their eggs in one basket, that was the American basket. We're just going to grovel before, Trump. And this is after, of course, Nord Stream. So this was even pre-Trump, but they decided that we're simply going to tie ourselves to the American hegemon. And now the American hegemon is turning on them, and they deserve it. I mean, that was just stupid. You just, you should diversify. You should try to maintain good relationships with as many powers as possible. And they chose this course, even though there was warnings, even prior, first of all, they knew that Trump could be reelected, and they knew that Trump didn't like him. But even under Biden, of course, we had the Nord Stream. And we had, the insistence that, okay, you have to slap tariffs on China or whatever, and you need to cut. He was pressuring him to do all these things. Now, there were elements within the leadership that just agreed with it and went along with it. But none of it made any sense from the European perspective. And now you need to buy our liquefied natural gas. They did it. And here they are. It's just like this has got to be the greatest, most spectacular, let's say, geopolitical political strategic failure in the history of mankind.
Right. A lot of self goals for them. But do you think there's a chance then that the Europeans could turn and try to move back to China and Russia, or they painted themselves where now they have nothing? I mean, just if you think about it, the way the Europeans look at it, they feel like they're being attacked from the east via Ukraine, via Russia, and now they feel like they're being attacked from the west by the United States taking Greenland, and they relied, used to have energy coming from Russia. That's gone. And now they rely on more expensive energy from the United States. The United States has complete leverage over Europe. And we know it. Trump knows it. And that's why he's making a mockery. They gave it to him. Exactly. They gave it to him. And now he's just using it. He's just saying, he's laughing at them. You have nothing, especially when they sent troops over to Greenland. I think that pissed him off. And now he's just like, screw you guys. And now Europe has nobody. They have no military. They have no economy. They have no energy. They have nothing. And so what's the choice that they have? They stick with the United States, even though the United States is becoming increasingly erratic and is becoming increasingly hated around the world, or do they try to pave their own path forward? But I think that's impossible. Or they try to, establish relations with China and Russia again.
Right. Well, the smart thing to do is to recognize there's a multipolar world, right? And the smart strategy always in such a, situation, in this world that now really does exist, is that you diversify your relationships again. That's the best way to do it. That gives you, with the more relationships you have with different powers, that's the more leverage you have with them too. But you see what happens. They did the opposite. So that would be the smart thing to do, to go that route. I just don't see them doing it, to be honest. First of all, they're so deeply committed to this Ukraine war, and the Project Ukraine cannot succeed. Well, it's not going to succeed anyway, but it just can't conceivably succeed, even in their own minds, their own deluded minds, without the firm support of the United States. It's clear that they just don't have the funds. They don't have the munitions. They can't do it. I think even with the U.S., they still can't succeed, but it becomes so, it's going to fail much sooner without the U.S. And the thing is, they're so committed to it that we're already hearing these voices. Oh, Ukraine's more important than Greenland. I think that in the end, they're probably just going to sacrifice Ukraine on the altar of, sacrifice Greenland on the altar of Ukraine. That's what they're going to do. They're going to roll up. They're very upset about this, but I think this leadership is probably can't really. They don't have the strength to stand up to the U.S. They still are committed to destroying Russia, though they can't do it. But some of them imagine they can do it with the American support, and it's going to be destroy Russia overall. I mean, I think that hasn't disappeared. But I think in the long run, maybe not that long a run, maybe we're talking more the medium term, this is going to change things. It's going to force changes within Europe because it is so humiliating. It's so glaringly obvious that they've made a huge mistake. And if these people that are in power, we're talking Frederiksen and Denmark, or Merz and Starmer and Macron, these people, if they can't, incapable of really, making a fundamental necessary change to policy, I think somebody else will have to. That this is going to be obvious to the electorates. It's going to be obvious to some, I hope that there are some sane minds, within the political class in Europe. But it's sort of like, okay, you say, well, you've been humiliated. Let's say a family or whatever is humiliated by a much more powerful neighbor, and the neighbor just takes a big part of your backyard or whatever. But the dad is weak and he submits to it. But then the sons, they grow up. And, when they're going to be furious about this, and maybe, one of them is going to make a change. That would say, and maybe that's not the best analogy. That's generational. I don't think it even has to be that long, but there got to be a lot of people that are really angry and saying that this is just, we have done the wrong thing. And even if these leaders can't set it right, somebody, I think we at least hope, there's still some sanity in Europe. Somebody will reorient the policy. And what I see happening is, maybe Russia, that's too hard, too bitter a pill to swallow right now, to say, okay, yeah, we made a mistake on Russia, because they've gone so far down that road. But at least they could start with China and say, and we see that happening with Canada right now, right? There has been a real change. Essentially, we did the wrong thing. It's what Carney is the current prime minister, and he's saying Trudeau did the wrong thing. We need to build bridges with China again. And yeah, he's smart. He's doing the right. He's taking the right steps there. And maybe we'll see something like that in Europe in the years to come. Anyway, say yeah, we need to start building bridges with China. But I think that would be eventually a bridge back to Russia, because it is really in their economic interest. And as they get used to working with China, eventually they'll say, well, why can't we work with Russia? But that may be years down the road. This is sort of, again, I think the best case scenario.
Right. So, I mean, really, the Europeans can't do anything about the United States taking Greenland. They have no leverage, like we said. I mean, they can't go to war with us over it. So we will just take it. And then
it's certainly looking like it. It's just like, again, Donald Trump is just doubling down again and again. Donald Trump, he flip-flops on all kinds of things, but he hasn't deviated from this line. We must take Greenland, right? And he's repeating it, and he's saying he's making it clear that it's a matter of personal, honor or something, or just I think he sees right there his legacy. Because one thing is, if he takes Greenland, Greenland, you look at, you say, well, that's just an icy island way up in the north. It's a huge landmass. So yeah, it is just an icy island way up in the north with only 57,000 people who are just clinging to the southern part of it because it's just, it's 98% ice, glacier. But it is a huge landmass, and larger than the Louisiana Purchase, much larger than Alaska. And by doing that, he would become, the president who made the largest land acquisition in the history of the United States. And no matter what, I think he's probably aware of that. And this is something that he really understands, and it really means something to him, and he wants to do it. And I think he will.
Okay, but it would have to be recognized, right? That the European countries would have to recognize this. Will the world recognize it? I mean, unless it has
obviously, yeah, there will be people. Obviously, we have a lot of kind of vassal states, smaller countries around the world. Israel will immediately recognize it, of course, and many, many other countries will. But I think it will be a minority of countries. I think there is real resistance, and probably the Europeans won't. But that doesn't make a difference. We can take it over.
And so you think it would be a permanent addition? Did we take it over?
Yeah, well, I think it probably would. There is a chance that, again, if the Democrats come back, and that's not certain, even though Trump's unpopular, the Democrats have a way of self-destructing, as we know. But they might come back, and the Democrats are much more in tune, in sync with Europe, right? And there is a chance, I would say anyway, that they could say, we're giving this back to you. That was a mistake. That was old Donald J. Trump. We're sorry about this. And because they do value, they do have a close relationship with the political establishment in Europe, the Democratic Party, and they're very cozy with each other. That's one reason I think why Trump hates the Europeans so much, because he's seen that. The Europeans at times have been very open about it, prior to his election, which again was stupid. You have to, what was it? Carmer actually sent some of his underlings to the U.S. to work on behalf of Kamala Harris. He doesn't forget these. But again, it shows that there is this relationship between the Democratic Party and Europe. So I think there is a chance, I have to say a significant chance, that if the Democrats come back in power in 2028, or if they're reelected, they would come back in power in 2029, that they would in fact go ahead and return it to him. But I don't think it's certain because we just have, like I've mentioned, there are other things that like Trump did that was against the Democrats, like the JCPOA and, relationship with China. And there's sort of there is this deep state that we talk about, the permanent, foreign policy bureaucracy. And they might even be opposed to it. The majority of them now, I think, probably are. And many of them are alarmed. But once we have it, they say, wow, this is now we're the second largest country in the world. You're second only to Russia in terms of territory. We'll surpass Canada. And look, I mean, we could do this and that with it. And there might be some mineral reserves. And so there's no guarantee, even if the Democrats come back in power, that we'll return it to them.
I just feel like that the United States isn't going to last just on the current trajectory we're going. It's just I feel like things are falling apart. How can we maintain, with their current level of debt, first of all, and we rely on being the world reserve currency. The whole world is rejecting the United States now, and it seems to be picking up speed. You brought up
right.
I mean, just for example, you brought up Mark Carney from the Prime Minister of Canada. Like he has made that move to get closer to China. And I think this is a huge sign. I think a lot of people haven't been paying a lot of attention to it. But for me, I think this is a huge deal because it is the right move. And I sent you a video. I don't know. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did see it.
I'm gonna share it here as well. And then I'm going to show one more as well, just so we can talk about I think this is quite significant.
Uh-huh.
It's been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister visited China. And this is a relationship that has been distant and uncertain for nearly a decade. That has held back investment, it's stalled business growth, and cost Canadian workers good opportunities. And that's why Canada's new government began to recalibrate our relationship with China. Through periods of global tension and disruption, we've created more opportunities for our workers, businesses, and investors by working together. That's the opportunity before us now. More stability, more certainty, and prosperity on both sides of the Pacific.
Okay, let me show you one more, Dad.
Okay.
And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
So Mark Carney, he knows what's up. He's saying specifically that this is a new world order, and he understands where the world is going, and the world lies in the east with Russia and China. Maybe not Russia for him, saying, but with China. And I think this is a huge move, and it's going to be a huge blow to Trump. It just shows he is shoving everybody into the arms of the Chinese. The Chinese Xi Jinping doesn't even have to do anything. They just let America be America, and China wins. China was viewed as this horrible authoritarian or communist country where they had no rights, and this propaganda was very effective for so many years. But now China is becoming more and more popular because we're not bombing people constantly. They're not acting so erratic. They're not slapping tariffs on people and invading countries. And so the world is turning to China. And I think this is huge.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is huge. It could be, you may see the dam breaking, at least as far as, relationship with China goes. One thing that I know Carney did is that he removed the 100% tariff on electric vehicles. And remember, that was imposed not under Trump, but under Biden. So it's, sometimes we put it all on Trump, but he's talked about the last 10 years, right? It was also under the Democratic administrations. And under Trudeau, it was very much, part of the liberal establishment. I think, that 100% tariff, for example, on electric vehicles is still in place in Europe, but it was stupid. I mean, especially if you say you're committed to green, clean energy. Look, the Chinese are making more of these vehicles and making them more cheaply than, anybody else on the planet. You have deprived yourself of, the most economic, efficient way of achieving your objectives. And that has got to be, it became clear. Carney saw it and said, okay, yeah, we're not playing this game because, of course, I think in large part, there is an incentive to going to China. You can see the rewards of developing an economic relationship with them. But there's also the that's the pull. But then the push is the Trump administration with its erratic tariffs. And it's, of course, Canada has been subjected to those, but so has Europe. Europe is currently under 15% tariffs that Trump imposed on them. But he's now threatened to raise that by another 10% starting February 1st on 8 countries. I guess the 8 countries that sent, some military personnel. Sometimes we're talking about 1, 3, 5, 15, something like that. So I think we're talking about Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the UK, France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Those are the 8. Now, Germany sent 15 guys over there. And they were there for 44 hours or something like that. And then they were sent back. Now, a lot of people think that they happened. It's like when he's threatened the tariffs, that's why they went back home. They've denied that, but it kind of looks that way. This. And then he said, like, if this whole thing isn't solved, if we don't have Greenland by June, then I'm slapping another 25%. I mean, this is something the Europeans have to wake up. I think they're going to have to make a choice at some point. They have, again, like they have just and submitted themselves. They have surrendered their sovereignty to the United States, and so much for the sake of attacking Russia. But this may actually break that. I mean, because if he does impose, it looks like he really is going to impose these additional 10%, and then you got another 25%. I think at some point it's just going to break. The Europeans are going to have to retaliate, or there's going to be tremendous pressure to do it. If they don't, I think governments are going to fall over there. But then you can't do that and have also, have all these tariff barriers between yourself and China. You're going to have to do what Carney did. And I think that's the long road back. That's the road to multipolarism. Even if they're going to pretend to be anti-Russian, I don't think they're going to be able to do it in the long run. They're going to need that Russian energy. They're not able to support Project Ukraine. I think that's where we are.
Right. So I think this is almost an inevitability when it happens. If Trump goes through with this and slaps 15, 25% additional tariffs and then takes Greenland, I mean, I imagine that there's a backbone somewhere in Europe where people are like, this is it. We've had enough. We can't do this. The Chinese aren't trying to screw us over like this, even though we're constantly demonizing them. Let's go work with them. Just look at Canada. In 2018, Canada arrested the CFO of Huawei, on the U.S.'s orders. That was the state of relations, with Canada and China 8 years ago, less than 8 years ago, I think. And look where they are now. China was supposed to be the enemy, and that's what their stance was. And then after Trump and this talk about making Canada the 51st state and slapping tariffs on their lumber and all this, Carney just made the logical decision, like, well, let me work with a more predictable, reliable, honorable partner, China. That actually, and this will be a huge benefit to Canada because China makes great stuff at a really cheap price. I mean, I'm jealous. I wish we could have the Chinese EVs. They're incredible. Huawei and Xiaomi, they make great devices, and we just sort of demonize, there's, back doors in there, and the CCP are listening on us. Like, even if they were, who cares? The U.S. is listening on us all the time. Everything, we phone tapped Merkel's phone, and they said, fine. It's like it's absurd. So I think it has to happen. But when that happens, when Europe leaves, the U.S. is dead, right? That means that the world reserve currency status, the unipolar moment, it's all gone. If Canada has already made this move and saying, like, look, we can't work with the United States anymore. We're going to establish stronger ties with China. Europe, I think, will go this route. They have to. It's the only way that they can survive.